My husband signed away his rights and left us because he wants normal children. Now he wants custody after learning that our son was a genius? When Oliver was 2, he wasn't talking yet, wasn't making eye contact, would line up his toy cars for hours in perfect rows. The pediatrician said we should get him evaluated. That's when my husband Keith started pulling away. He sat through the autism diagnosis with his arms crossed, shaking his head. In the parking lot, he told me this wasn't possible. His family didn't have those genes. His brother's kids were all normal. His cousins were normal. This had to come from my side, or maybe Oliver wasn't even his. I showed him the test results from when he demanded a paternity test 6 months earlier, because Oliver's eyes were hazel and ours were brown. Oliver was definitely his son. Keith said the test must be wrong. Or maybe I'd messed up during pregnancy. Taken something. Done something. Something is broken inside our baby. He moved into the guest room that night. 3 weeks later, he was gone. Left a note saying he couldn't watch his bloodline be contaminated. That he wanted normal children. That I should find Oliver's real father to help pay for whatever special schools he'd need. The divorce papers came a month later. He signed away all parental rights. Didn't want visitation. Didn't want updates. Didn't want his name on anything connected to Oliver. He told his family Oliver had severe disabilities and would never have a normal life. Told his coworkers I'd probably drunk during pregnancy. Told anyone who asked that it was better for everyone if he started fresh. He married Bethany 2 years later and had twin boys who he constantly posted about. Look at them throwing balls. Look at them saying daddy. Look at his real sons being perfectly normal. Meanwhile, Oliver and I figured things out alone. Speech therapy 3 times a week. Occupational therapy twice a week. Special education preschool. I worked nights at the hospital so I could be there for all his appointments during the day. We lived on peanut butter sandwiches and whatever was on sale. But Oliver was incredible. By 4, he was reading chapter books. By 5, he was doing multiplication. By 6, he was playing piano pieces after hearing them once. The autism wasn't a flaw. It was just how his brilliant brain worked. He saw patterns nobody else could see. Remembered everything he read. Could solve complex problems in his head. His teachers started using words like gifted and prodigy, and exceptional. By 8, Oliver was in a special program for profoundly gifted children. He won the state science fair with a project about mathematical patterns in nature. Got invited to a summer program at the university. Started learning calculus because regular math bored him. The local newspaper did a story about him. That's when Keith called for the first time in 6 years. He'd seen the article. Wanted to know why I hadn't told him Oliver was doing so well. Said he had a right to know about his son's accomplishments. I reminded him he'd signed away those rights. He hung up, but he didn't stop. He started showing up at Oliver's competitions. Sitting in the back, taking pictures. When Oliver won the National Mathematics Championship for his age group, Keith was there in a suit telling other parents about his gifted son. How he'd always known Oliver was special. How he'd encouraged his interests from the beginning. How proud he was of his boy. Oliver didn't even know who he was. Called him the strange man who kept staring at him. Last week, Oliver got accepted to a prestigious academy for gifted children. Full scholarship. Newspaper coverage. Television interview. The story of the 9-year-old autistic genius heading to a school for future leaders. Keith showed up at our door with Bethany and the twins. Said it was time for Oliver to meet his brothers. That they were a family. He wanted to be part of Oliver's journey. That he could provide things I couldn't. Private tutors, better resources, connections in the academic world. He actually said he was the reason Oliver was so smart. His genes. His brilliant bloodline finally showing through. Bethany stood there nodding like she hadn't known he'd abandoned us. Like he hadn't called our son contaminated. The twins were confused why they were at some strange house. Oliver was doing homework in his room. I told Keith to wait outside. Then I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out 6 years of documents. The termination papers were right on top where I'd filed them 7 years ago. I pulled out the thick folder and spread everything across my kitchen table. Keith's signature on the document where he signed away all parental rights. The paternity test results he'd demanded. Stacks of medical bills from Oliver's therapy sessions with past due stamped across them in red. The note he'd left, his handwriting still clear after all these years, the words contaminated bloodline and real children jumping off the page. I organized everything in order by date. Started with the diagnosis paperwork from when Oliver was 2. Then the paternity test from 6 months later. Then Keith's note. Then the termination papers. Then years of unpaid bills and missed support payments. My hands didn't shake. I felt calm in a way I hadn't expected. This was just facts. Just truth. Just proof of exactly what happened and who Keith really was. I put everything back in the folder and walked to the front door. Keith stood on my porch with Bethany beside him and the twins fidgeting near the steps. He had his arms crossed and that same look on his face from 7 years ago. Like he was doing me a favor by being here. Like I should be grateful he was willing to acknowledge Oliver now. I opened the door and handed him the folder without saying anything. He took it looking confused. Started flipping through the pages. His face went white. Actually white. All the color drained out like someone had pulled a plug. He stared at his own signature on the termination papers. At his own handwriting on that note. Bethany leaned over to look and I watched her face change. She started reading faster, flipping pages, going back to read things again. Keith finally looked up at me. Said he was young and scared back then. That he made mistakes but people deserve second chances. That Oliver turned out fine so it all worked out. I didn't say anything. Just reached over and flipped to the page with his note. Pointed to the part where he wrote that Oliver would never have a normal life. Where he said he wanted to start fresh with real children. Where he told me to find Oliver's real father, even though the paternity test proved Oliver was his. Keith tried to close the folder but Bethany grabbed it from him. She kept reading. Her mouth was open. She looked at Keith like she'd never seen him before. Then she looked at me, asked if this was all true, if Keith really wrote these things, if he really abandoned a 2-year-old because of autism. I nodded, told her everything in that folder was real and documented, that Keith didn't just leave. He erased us. Told everyone Oliver was severely disabled and would never be normal. Told people I probably drank during pregnancy. Started a whole new family and pretended his first son didn't exist. Bethany's hands were shaking holding the folder. She looked at Keith. He started talking fast. Said I was making it sound worse than it was. That he was overwhelmed and didn't know how to handle it. That his family had expectations and he panicked. Bethany cut him off. Asked why he never told her any of this. Why he let her think he had no other children. Why he was suddenly showing up now after 9 years. Keith said because Oliver was doing well now. Because he could actually be proud of him now. Because Oliver turned out to be gifted and special. And that was his genetics finally showing through. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Told Keith he gave up the right to call himself Oliver's father 7 years ago. That no amount of success or media attention changed what he did. That he needed to leave my home and stay away from my son. Keith's face changed. Got hard. He said he had legal rights as a biological parent. That courts favor father involvement now. That he could afford lawyers and I couldn't. That he'd fight for visitation and custody if he had to. The twins started crying. They'd been quiet this whole time, but now they were sobbing. They'd never heard their dad yell like this. Never seen him angry. Bethany bent down trying to comfort them, but they were scared and confused. I stayed calm. Told Keith to have his lawyers contact me. Then I stepped back and closed the door while he was still talking. Locked it. Walked to the living room window and watched through the curtain. Bethany was loading the twins into their car. They were still crying. Keith stood on my porch looking at the documents. He tried the doorbell twice, but I didn't answer. Finally, he walked to the car. Bethany was already in the driver's seat. They sat there for a few minutes. I could see them arguing. Then Bethany drove away with Keith still holding the folder. I heard Oliver's door open. He came out of his room with his math book. Asked why there were people yelling. Why someone was ringing the doorbell so many times. I looked at my 9-year-old son who didn't know his biological father existed. Who'd grown up with just me. Who was brilliant and kind and perfect exactly as he was. I sat down on the couch and patted the spot next to me. Told him we needed to talk about something important. Oliver sat down, still holding his math book. He looked at me with those hazel eyes that had started this whole thing. I took a breath. Told him the man at the door was the person who helped make him. But that person left when Oliver was very small. Decided he didn't want to be a parent. Oliver processed this the way he processed everything. Asked if that made the man his biological father. I said yes. He asked why the man left. I said because Oliver was different in ways the man didn't understand. Oliver thought about this. Asked if it was because of the autism. My heart broke having to say yes. That was exactly why. Oliver was quiet for a long time. Just sat there thinking. Then he said that sounded like the man's problem, not his. That if someone couldn't handle different kinds of brains, that person probably wasn't very smart. I almost laughed. Almost cried. Did neither. Just pulled Oliver close and held him. He let me for about 10 seconds before he squirmed away and opened his math book. Asked if he could finish his homework now. I said yes. Watched him walk back to his room like nothing had happened. Like the world hadn't just shifted. But I guess for Oliver it hadn't. He'd never known Keith. Never missed him. Never needed him. We'd been fine for 7 years. We'd be fine for 7 more. For 70 more. Whatever came next, we'd handle it the same way we'd handled everything else. Together. That night I can't sleep. I keep hearing his voice saying he could afford lawyers and I couldn't. Kept seeing his face when he threatened to fight for custody. At 2 in the morning, I'm on my laptop searching terminated parental rights. And can they be reinstated? Every website says something different. Some say it's permanent. Others say courts can reverse it if circumstances change. I find cases where fathers came back after years and got visitation. Cases where judges said kids deserve relationships with both parents. My chest gets tight reading these stories. I click through pages and pages of legal documents and forum posts from other parents. By 4 in the morning, I have 20 browser tabs open and no clear answers. Just more fear. Oliver has school in 6 hours. I should sleep, but I can't stop reading. One website mentions support groups for single parents. I bookmark it. Another talks about family law attorneys who do payment plans. I write down 3 names. The sun comes up and I'm still at my laptop with cold coffee and a list of lawyers to call. I hear Oliver's alarm go off. Get up and make him breakfast like everything is normal. He eats his cereal and talks about a math problem he wants to solve. I smile and nod and my mind is somewhere else entirely. After I drop him at the school, I sit in my car and call the first lawyer on my list. They want a $5,000 retainer. I don't have $5,000. The second lawyer doesn't take payment plans. The third one is Lars. His secretary asks what kind of case and I say parental rights termination. She puts me on hold. When Lars gets on the phone, his voice is calm and steady. I explain the situation as quickly as I can. He asks if I have documentation. I say yes, lots of it. He says he can see me at 2 that afternoon. Bring everything. I spend the morning organizing every paper in that filing cabinet. The termination documents, the paternity test, medical bills with Keith's name crossed out and refused to pay written in red, the note he left, printouts of his social media posts about his perfect twin boys, screenshots of him at Oliver's competitions pretending to be proud. I put it all in a folder in order by date. A complete timeline of abandonment. Lars's office is in a building downtown that needs new carpet. His waiting room has old magazines and a coffee maker that looks like it hasn't been cleaned in months. But when he comes out to get me, his handshake is firm and his eyes are kind. He leads me to his office and gestures to a chair. I sit down and hand him the folder. He opens it and starts reading. Doesn't say anything for a long time. Just reads page after page. His expression doesn't change, but I see his jaw tighten when he gets to the note about contaminated bloodlines. He closes the folder and looks at me. Tells me Keith's termination is ironclad. The legal term is voluntary relinquishment of parental rights. Keith signed it knowing exactly what he was doing. For it to be reversed, he'd have to prove he was forced or mentally incompetent when he signed. Lars taps the folder. This documentation shows he was neither. He was cruel and deliberate. But that's actually good for my case. I feel something loosen in my chest. Lars keeps talking. He explains that Keith could still file a motion to reinstate his rights. Any parent can file anything. But given this documentation and 7 years of zero contact, no judge would grant it. The courts want stability for children. They don't reward parents who abandon kids and come back when it's convenient. Still, I need to be prepared. Keith might try. The process will be stressful even if we win. I ask how much this will cost. Lars names a number that makes my stomach drop. Then he says he does payment plans for cases like this. $200 a month. I can barely afford that, but I can't afford not to have a lawyer. I tell him yes. He pulls out paperwork and I sign it. He says he'll file documents immediately to formally oppose any attempt Keith makes. Creates a legal record that I'm protecting Oliver's interests. We're getting ahead of this. I leave his office feeling like I can breathe again. Not all the way, but enough. 3 days go by. Oliver goes to the school. I go to work. We eat dinner and do homework and everything feels almost normal. Then Lars calls. Keith's lawyer sent a letter. Lars emails me a copy and I read it on my phone. The letter claims Keith was suffering from untreated depression when he terminated his rights. That he wasn't in his right mind. That he's been in therapy for years and is now stable and ready to be a father. That he wants to establish a relationship with his son for Oliver's benefit. It's all lies, but it sounds good on paper. I call Lars back. He says it's a predictable strategy and it has no legal merit. Keith's own documentation proves he was thinking clearly. He got remarried, had more kids, built a whole new life. That's not the behavior of someone mentally incompetent. I ask about the depression claim. Lars says even if it were true, depression alone doesn't make someone incompetent to sign legal documents. And Keith never sought to reverse the termination until Oliver became successful. That timing tells the real story. Then Lars tells me about the second part of the letter. It threatens to sue me for defamation if I tell anyone about Keith's past actions. Claims his reputation and career could be damaged. Lars actually laughs. Says truth is an absolute defense against defamation. If I tell people what Keith did and I can prove it's true, there's no case. And we can prove every word. The documentation is solid. But the threat tells us something important. Keith is worried about his image. That's leverage. I hang up and stare at my phone. Keith isn't just trying to get access to Oliver. He's trying to control the narrative. Make sure no one knows what he really did. I think about Oliver's new academy. About the security protocols and the intake forms that list no father. Keith could show up there. Could try to claim parental rights to the staff. I need to warn them. I call the academy and ask for Rita. She's the director. We met during Oliver's acceptance interview. When she gets on the phone, I explain the situation. Keep it brief and factual. My ex-husband terminated his parental rights 7 years ago. Now he's trying to come back. He's made threats about lawyers and custody. I'm worried he might try to show up at the academy claiming he's Oliver's father. Rita's voice goes professional and serious. She takes notes, asks questions, tells me their security protocols are strict. No one gets access to students without proper authorization. She'll flag Oliver's file, add notes about the situation. If anyone claiming to be his father shows up, security will call me immediately. I thank her. Start to hang up. Then she says something that makes my blood run cold. She mentions that someone called the academy 2 days ago. A man asking about parent involvement opportunities, volunteering to speak to students about encouraging gifted children, talking about his own son who'd be attending. She thought it was odd because Oliver's intake forms list no father. She didn't connect it at the time, but now she's wondering if that was him. I ask what name he gave. She checks her notes. Keith Morgan. My hands start shaking. He called them 2 days ago. Before his lawyer sent the letter. Before any of this became official. He's already making moves. Already inserting himself into Oliver's new life. I thank Rita again and hang up. Sit there in my car outside the hospital where I work. Everything clicks into place. Keith isn't trying to reconnect with Oliver. He's trying to reconnect with Oliver's success. The newspaper article made Oliver visible. The TV interview made him famous. Keith wants to be visible too. Wants to stand next to the genius kid and take credit. Tell everyone about his brilliant genes and his proud fatherhood. He's already rewriting history on social media. Now he wants to rewrite it everywhere else. At the academy, at future competitions, in every article and interview. He wants to be the dad who always believed in his gifted son. And he'll use lawyers and threats and whatever else it takes to force his way into that story. My phone rings before I can start the car. Unknown number. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. A woman's voice asks if this is Oliver's mom. I say yes and ask who's calling. She tells me it's Heidi Morgan, Keith's sister. I haven't heard from her in 5 years. My hand tightens on the steering wheel. She says she saw Keith's social media posts about his gifted son, and she knew immediately he was talking about Oliver. Her voice shakes when she tells me she's disgusted by his lies. She saw the newspaper article, saw the TV interview, watched Keith commenting on everything like he'd been there all along. She wants me to know she remembers what really happened. Remembers Keith saying Oliver was broken. Remembers him walking away and never looking back. I sit there listening and don't know whether to trust her. She's his family. But she keeps talking. Tells me Keith's been posting for weeks now. telling everyone Oliver lives with his mother but they co-parent, that he's been involved all along, that his genetics are the reason for Oliver's gifts. She sounds angry, really angry. Says she wants to help me set the record straight. I tell her I don't know if I can trust any member of Keith's family. There's silence on the line. Then she says she understands, but she's going to send me screenshots anyway. She hangs up before I can respond. 2 minutes later, my phone starts buzzing with incoming messages. Screenshot after screenshot of Keith's Facebook posts, Instagram stories, Twitter threads. I scroll through them and feel sick. He's posting old baby photos of Oliver that he must have kept all these years. Photos I forgot he even had. There's Oliver at 6 months with his toy cars. Oliver at 18 months reaching for a book. Keith's captions make me want to throw my phone. My brilliant boy showing early signs of his gifts. So proud of how far he's come with my support. Watching my son grow into a genius has been my greatest joy. Every single post is a lie. Every caption rewrites history. Makes Keith the devoted father who recognized Oliver's potential. The supportive parent who encouraged his development. The proud dad who always believed. There are comments from people I don't know. Friends of Keith's I've never met. They're all congratulating him. Telling him what an amazing father he is. How lucky Oliver is to have such a dedicated dad. Some mention seeing the TV interview and how touching it was. How Keith must be so proud. I screenshot everything Heidi sent me. Save them all to a folder on my phone. Then I call Lars even though it's almost 6 in the evening. He answers on the 3rd ring. I tell him about Heidi's call and the social media posts. Send him the screenshots while we're talking. He's quiet for a minute while he looks through them. Then he tells me to document everything Keith posts publicly. Every lie, every photo, every comment. This establishes his motivation for suddenly wanting contact. This isn't about Oliver's well-being. It's about Keith's ego and image. Lars says we can use this in court if Keith tries anything. Shows his pattern of deception. His need for public validation. The fact that he's building a false narrative before making any legal moves. I thank Lars and hang up. Drive home on autopilot. My mind keeps replaying those captions. My support. My encouragement. My son. Like he was there for any of it. Like he didn't abandon us when Oliver needed him most. I pull into my apartment parking lot and see a car I don't recognize. A woman gets out as I park. She's older, maybe 60. Dressed nice, but her eyes are red. She walks toward me and I realize who she is before she says anything. Hannah Morgan, Keith's mother. Oliver's biological grandmother. I haven't seen her since Oliver was a baby. I get out of my car slowly, keep my keys in my hand. She stops a few feet away. Starts crying before she even speaks. Tells me she never knew the full truth about why Keith left. I stand there not saying anything. She keeps talking through tears. Says Keith told the family I was unstable. That I kept Oliver from him. That he wanted contact, but I refused. She believed him for years. Believed her son because why wouldn't she? Now she's seen the article. Seen Keith's posts. Started asking questions. Keith's brother finally told her what really happened. Told her about the diagnosis. About Keith calling Oliver contaminated. About the termination of rights. She's horrified. Keeps saying she didn't know. She asks if she can have a relationship with Oliver. Says she knows she has no legal right. No claim to him after missing 7 years of his life. But she's hoping I'll consider it. She wants to know her grandson. Wants to be part of his life if I'll let her. I look at this woman who believed her son's lies and I don't know what to feel. Part of me is angry that she never questioned Keith's story. Never tried to find out the truth. But she's here now. Crying on my doorstep. Admitting she was wrong. I tell her I need time to think about it. Need to discuss it with Oliver. She nods and wipes her eyes. Pulls out a card with her phone number and email address. Hands it to me with shaking fingers. Thanks me for even considering it. She walks back to her car looking smaller and older than when she arrived. I watch her drive away. Stand in the parking lot holding her card. Go inside and find Oliver at the kitchen table doing math problems. He looks up when I come in. Asks who the crying lady was. I sit down across from him. Tell him she's his biological grandmother who didn't know about him until now. Oliver thinks about this for a minute. Then he asks if she's good at math. I laugh despite everything. Despite Keith's lies and Hannah's tears and the whole mess. Tell him I don't know, but maybe we can find out. Oliver nods and goes back to his homework. Like meeting his grandmother is just another interesting fact to process. 3 days later, Lars calls with news I was expecting but still dreading. Keith filed his motion to reinstate parental rights. The paperwork claims he's now financially stable. Married with a proper home. Able to provide opportunities I cannot. Private tutors, better resources, academic connections. Everything he said on my doorstep, but now in legal language. Lars tells me he was right that Keith would try this. Now we have to fight it in court. The court date gets set for 6 weeks out and Lars calls me the next morning with a list of what he needs. Character witnesses who can talk about my parenting and Oliver's needs. Every piece of documentation from Oliver's therapy sessions over the years. School records showing my involvement in his education. Medical bills I paid alone. Proof of every appointment I drove him to while Keith was posting pictures of his other kids online. I spend the weekend pulling together 7 years of my life in folders and binders. Speech therapy progress notes from when Oliver was 3. Occupational therapy evaluations. IEP meetings where I sat alone while other kids had both parents. Report cards, teacher conferences, piano recital programs, science fair ribbons. Everything that shows I was there for every single moment while Keith pretended Oliver didn't exist. Lars reviews it all in his office on Monday and tells me this is exactly what he needs. The evidence speaks for itself. I want to believe him, but I'm scared of standing in front of a judge and having Keith's lawyers twist everything. They'll make me look like I'm keeping a father from his child. Like I'm bitter about the divorce and using Oliver as revenge. Like Keith's sudden interest is genuine and I'm the one being cruel. Lars sees my hands shaking as I stack the folders and he stops me. Tells me facts and documentation will speak louder than Keith's emotional manipulation. The judge will see the termination papers Keith signed voluntarily. The years of zero contact. The lies he told his family. The timing of his return matching Oliver's media coverage. We have the truth on our side. And that matters more than whatever story Keith's lawyers try to sell. I nod, but the fear doesn't go away. Rita calls me that evening and asks if I have a minute to talk. She says she heard through the Academy's legal department that there's a custody situation developing, and she wants to offer her help. She's willing to testify about Oliver's needs and the importance of stability in his life, especially as he transitions to the Academy. She's dealt with similar cases before, and knows how disruptive parental conflict can be for gifted children. Oliver needs consistency and security to thrive, not chaos from a stranger trying to force his way into Oliver's life for publicity. I thank her and tell Lars the next day. He adds her to the witness list immediately. Her professional expertise will carry weight with the judge. 2 days later, I take Oliver to the library for his Tuesday math tutoring session. We're walking up the steps when I see Keith's car in the parking lot. He's sitting behind the wheel watching the entrance. Doesn't get out, doesn't approach, just sits there making sure we see him. Oliver notices and asks why that man is here again. I take Oliver inside and text Lars from the children's section while Oliver works with his tutor. On Saturday, we go to the park for our usual weekend walk. Keith is there on a bench near the playground. Same thing, watching, not approaching, making his presence known. I pull out my phone and take a picture with the timestamp visible. Do the same thing on Tuesday at the library. Document every single instance. The dates, the times, the locations. Lars files for a restraining order based on harassment and intimidation. Says this behavior is designed to scare me, and shows Keith's real motivation isn't about Oliver's well-being. The hearing for that gets scheduled 2 weeks before the parental rights hearing. My phone rings on a Thursday afternoon and the caller ID shows Bethany's number. I almost don't answer. Let it go to voicemail. But something makes me pick up. She's crying before she even says hello. Tells me she's left Keith and is staying with her sister. That she can't be married to someone who abandoned a disabled child and then lied about it for years. She saw the documents I gave Keith. Read every page after he tried to hide them. She had no idea he had another son. He told her before they got married that he'd never been a father before. That the twins were his first children. Everything was a lie. She kept asking him questions and he kept changing his story until finally he admitted the truth. Admitted he signed away his rights because he didn't want an autistic kid. Admitted he only came back because Oliver got famous. She packed her bags that night. She asks if she can help somehow. Says she'll testify about Keith's recent behavior and the lies he told her about Oliver. She's furious that he let her believe he had no other children and is now using their twins as props in his redemption story, taking them to my house like there's some kind of proof he's a good father. She wants the judge to know what kind of man Keith really is. Lars adds her to the witness list and tells me this is huge. The wife leaving and offering testimony destroys Keith's image of stable family man. The restraining order hearing happens on a Wednesday morning. I take the day off work and meet Lars at the courthouse. Keith shows up with his lawyer acting wounded that I'd accuse him of harassment when he just wants to see his son. His lawyer argues that Keith has been trying to establish a relationship and I'm being unreasonable. That showing up at public places isn't stalking. That any father would want to catch glimpses of the child he's been kept from. Lars presents my documentation. Photos with timestamps showing Keith at the library during Oliver's tutoring. At the park during our walks. Always watching. Never approaching to actually interact with Oliver. The pattern of behavior designed to intimidate. The judge reviews everything and asks Keith's lawyer why Keith didn't just request supervised visitation through proper channels if his interest was genuine. The lawyer stumbles through an answer about wanting to see Oliver in natural settings first. The judge isn't buying it. She grants a temporary restraining order. Keith is ordered to stay 100 yards away from me, Oliver, our home and Oliver's school. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Keith looks genuinely shocked that there are consequences for his actions. His lawyer tries to argue, but the judge cuts him off. The order stands until the parental rights hearing where everything will be addressed together. I walk out of the courthouse and feel like I can breathe for the first time in weeks. My phone rings 2 days later. The newspaper reporter who did the original story about Oliver. She asks if I have time to talk about rumors that Oliver's father is trying to reconnect. Says she's heard things around town and wants to get the facts straight. I tell her I can't comment on ongoing legal matters. She understands, but asks me to call if I change my mind. I tell Lars about it and he goes quiet for a minute. Then he says we might want to control the narrative. Keith's been spinning his version to anyone who will listen. Maybe it's time people heard the truth. I spend 2 days thinking about what Lars said. Looking at Oliver doing his homework at the kitchen table. Watching him line up his pencils in perfect rows before starting each problem. He's so focused on the math he doesn't notice me staring. I think about Keith telling everyone his version of the story, making himself look good while Oliver and I know the truth. The reporter's card sits on my counter where I left it. On the third day I call her back and say I'll do the interview. She comes to my apartment that afternoon with a recording device and a notepad. I show her everything. The termination papers with Keith's signature, the paternity test results, the note where he wrote about contaminated bloodlines, the medical bills he refused to pay, the documentation of every therapy appointment I took Oliver to alone. She takes photos of the documents and asks questions about the timeline. I tell her everything in a flat voice because if I let emotion in, I might start crying and never stop. She asks if she can quote directly from Keith's note, and I say yes. The truth needs to be public exactly as it happened. The article runs 3 days later on the front page of the local section. The headline reads, "Father who abandoned autistic son returns after boy becomes prodigy." There's a photo of Oliver from the Academy announcement next to excerpts from Keith's termination papers. The reporter included the part where Keith wrote that he wanted normal children and couldn't watch his bloodline be contaminated. She quoted his lawyer's letter claiming depression, but contrasted it with evidence that Keith was posting about his perfect twins during the same time period. The article includes statements from teachers about Oliver's brilliance and my years of single parenting through therapy and special education. By noon, my phone won't stop buzzing. Text messages from people I haven't talked to in years saying they had no idea. Emails from other parents of autistic kids thanking me for speaking out. The newspaper's website crashes from traffic and they have to bring the servers back up. Someone shares the article on social media and it spreads everywhere. Comments flood in calling Keith every name you can think of. People find his social media accounts and leave messages on every post about his twins, asking how he can be such a good dad to them when he abandoned his first son, pointing out his lies about being involved in Oliver's life, screenshotting his old posts where he talked about his perfect normal boys and asking what he meant by normal. The autism community rallies hard, parents sharing their own stories of partners who left after diagnosis, advocates talking about the harm of viewing autism as contamination, teachers and therapists weighing in about the damage Keith's attitude causes. By the next morning, the story has been picked up by regional news outlets. Then a national parenting website runs a piece about fathers who abandon disabled children. Keith's name is everywhere. His employer's social media gets tagged in hundreds of comments asking how they can employ someone who abandoned his autistic child. The company releases a statement saying they take family values seriously and are conducting an internal review. Keith gets put on administrative leave pending the investigation. His LinkedIn profile gets flooded with comments. His professional reputation is destroyed in less than 48 hours. Bethany's divorce filing becomes public record, and a legal blog picks it up because she cited his deception about having another child and his character issues as grounds. The filing includes her statement that she cannot remain married to someone who abandoned a disabled child and lied about it for years. People start connecting the dots that Keith's perfect family image was built on abandoning his first son. Hannah calls me on a Thursday afternoon. Her voice is shaking when she says she's ashamed of what her son did. She read the article 3 times and cried through all of it. She wants to support Oliver and me however she can. I ask if she's willing to testify at the parental rights hearing about Keith's history and the lies he told the family. She says yes immediately. She'll tell the judge everything about how Keith described Oliver as severely disabled and said it was better to start fresh, how he posted about his real sons being normal, how he kept the family away from us for years with his lies. I thank her, and we agree to meet the following week so Oliver can get to know his grandmother properly. Lars gives me the name of a therapist who works with gifted children dealing with family issues. Justin Byers has an office downtown in a building with a coffee shop on the first floor. I take Oliver there on a Saturday morning and we sit in a waiting room with puzzles and books. Justin comes out to meet us and he's younger than I expected with an easy smile. He takes Oliver back to his office while I wait. They're in there for an hour. When they come out, Oliver looks calm and tells me Justin has a Rubik's Cube collection and they talked about pattern recognition. Justin asks to speak with me alone for a few minutes. He says Oliver is handling everything remarkably well, using his logical thinking to separate Keith's actions from his own worth. Oliver understands that Keith's rejection says something about Keith, not about Oliver. But Justin wants to see Oliver regularly as things progress. Even though Oliver processes things logically now, his understanding will deepen as he gets older. We should plan for ongoing support as he develops emotionally and socially. I schedule weekly appointments and feel relieved that Oliver has professional help navigating this mess. The week before the parental rights hearing is supposed to happen, Lars calls me at work. Keith's lawyer contacted him about withdrawing the motion. Keith wants to avoid the public hearing where Hannah and Bethany would testify, and more details would become part of the court record. His reputation is already in pieces, and a hearing would finish the job. Lars says we can agree to withdrawal, but only under specific conditions. Keith has to sign an enhanced termination agreement that includes provisions against any future attempts to reinstate rights. He has to acknowledge in writing that his previous termination was voluntary and informed, not the result of depression or coercion. He has to agree to stay away from Oliver permanently with no exceptions. Lars emails me the draft agreement and it's thorough. Keith would be signing away any claim to Oliver forever with no possibility of coming back in another 9 years when Oliver is successful again. I approve it and Lars sends it to Keith's lawyer. 2 days later, Lars calls to say Keith signed everything. Didn't even try to negotiate. Just put his signature on every page his lawyer put in front of him. The hearing gets canceled and Lars files the new termination papers with the court. It's over in a way that feels anticlimactic after weeks of stress and fear. Lars calls me that evening after the papers are filed and tells me to focus on what we actually accomplished. Keith's reputation is destroyed. His family knows the truth. Bethany left him. His employer put him on leave. He lost his perfect family image and any credibility he might have had. Those are real consequences even if he gets to walk away from the courtroom drama. I know Lars is right, but part of me wanted to watch Keith squirm under oath while Hannah and Bethany testified. Wanted a judge to tell him exactly what kind of person abandons a disabled toddler. But Oliver is safe and Keith can never come back. That's what matters. Oliver finds me in the kitchen that night while I'm washing dishes. He asks if the man will leave us alone now. I dry my hands and crouch down to his eye level. Yes, I promise him. The man signed papers that say he can never try to be part of your life again. Oliver nods once and goes back to his room where his math workbook is spread across his desk. He seems completely unbothered by the whole situation. Later that week, I mention this to Justin during our regular appointment. Justin says Oliver is processing everything through his logical framework right now, which is healthy. But we should watch for delayed reactions as Oliver gets older and understands more about what rejection means emotionally. Some things take years to fully process. Hannah calls on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after Keith signed the final termination papers. Her voice is steadier than the last time we spoke. She asks again about having a relationship with Oliver. She knows she has no legal right and she'll understand if I say no, but she's proven herself by standing against her own son in court documents. She told the truth about Keith's lies even though it meant admitting she believed him for years. Oliver deserves to know his grandmother if I'm willing to give her that chance. I think about it for 2 days. Hannah could have stayed silent, could have protected Keith. Instead, she offered to testify about everything he said and did. She called him out publicly. That takes courage. I call her back and agree to supervised visits at neutral locations. She cries and thanks me. We schedule the first meeting for the following Saturday at a coffee shop downtown that has a quiet back room. I drive Oliver there on Saturday morning and Hannah is already waiting at a corner table. She brought a photo album that's older than I am, sits down next to Oliver and opens it carefully. Shows him pictures of Keith as a baby, Keith's father and grandfather, Keith's cousins and aunts and uncles. Oliver leans in close, studying each photo with the same intensity he uses for math problems. Hannah points out eye colors and facial features. Oliver inherited his hazel eyes from his great-grandfather, his nose shape from his grandmother's side, the way his hair grows in a cowlick from Keith's father. Oliver is fascinated by the patterns of genetic traits across generations. Asks Hannah questions about dominant and recessive genes. She doesn't know all the scientific answers, but she knows the family stories. Who looked like who? Which traits skipped generations? Oliver touches the old photos gently and asks if he can see them again sometime. Hannah's eyes fill with tears, but she keeps smiling. She becomes a regular presence in our lives after that. Visits twice a month on Saturday afternoons. Calls every Wednesday evening to hear about Oliver's week and his progress at the school. She's careful about boundaries. Never pushes for more time. Never makes excuses for Keith, or tries to explain away what he did. Just focuses on building a relationship with Oliver based on who they are now. Oliver likes her. Tells me she's good at remembering details about his projects and asking smart questions. Rita calls me at work on a Tuesday in late October. The Academy board met yesterday and discussed how I handled the situation with Keith. They were impressed by my advocacy for Oliver, and my ability to navigate complex family dynamics while prioritizing his needs. The board wants to offer me a position in their parent liaison office. The job involves helping other families transition to the academy, connecting them with resources, and supporting parents through challenges. The pay is better than the hospital. The hours are during the day. I'd be home every evening with Oliver. I tell Rita I need to think about it, but I already know my answer. I call her back the next morning and accept. Give my 2 weeks notice at the hospital that afternoon. My supervisor understands. Says I've been working nights for 7 years and it's time for something better. The last night shift I work feels different, knowing I'll never have to do this again. Never have to leave Oliver sleeping while I drive to the hospital in the dark. Never have to survive on 3 hours of sleep between his morning routine and my evening shift. I can finally stop running on empty. Bethany's divorce from Keith is finalized in November. She gets primary custody of the twins with strict provisions about Keith not disparaging Oliver or his mother in front of the boys. A few days later, an envelope arrives at my apartment. Inside is a note from Bethany on cream-colored paper. She apologizes for her part in the situation, for standing in my doorway acting like she didn't know what Keith had done, for not questioning his story earlier. She hopes Oliver is doing well and says the twins will know the truth about their half-brother when they're old enough to understand. 6 months after Keith's failed attempt to reinstate his rights, Oliver wins another national mathematics competition. This one is for students under 12 and he's the youngest competitor by 2 years. The local newspaper covers it. The education reporter interviews Oliver about his problem-solving strategies, takes photos of him with his trophy. The article runs on the front page of the Metro section. No one asks about his father. No one mentions the controversy from months ago. Keith stays completely silent on social media, doesn't post the article or take credit or show up claiming pride. He's finally gone from our lives the way he should have been all along. I buy 3 copies of the newspaper, frame one of them and hang it on the living room wall next to Oliver's acceptance letter to the academy. Stand back and look at what we've built together over 9 years. The walls of our small apartment are covered with evidence of Oliver's achievements and the life we created just the 2 of us. Academy,